Used by the regime in Egypt that there could be an Islamist takeover. How far do you analyse the influence of Islamist groups in what is happening in Libya?
In Libya, we don't have fundamentalist groups. The Libyan people, all in general, are moderate people. I cannot deny there is some groups, but I wouldn't classify them as fundamentalist groups. And I don't think even the Libyan people accepting the idea of fundamentalism anyway. So it is another tactics safe trying to use to scare the West in first place from the fundamentalist groups and ideas.
Okay, good to talk to you for the moment. Thank you very much indeed, Awad El-Fwayturi from the Libyan Information Centre there. Meanwhile, in a sign of growing dissent, a former senior government official has spoken out against the regime. Mohamed Bayou, who until a month ago was the chief government spokesman, said he hoped the government would change its speech to acknowledge the existence of an internal popular opposition. He also urged Gaddafi loyalists to enter into a dialogue with them and introduce thorough changes to the Libyan system. The comments are evidence of internal disagreements among Libya's decision makers. Bayou went on to say the government was wrong to threaten violence against its opponents. On the line now we have Ahmed Jibril, who is currently a Libyan diplomat, and he's on the border between Libya and Egypt. Good to have you with us. First of all, what is the situation where you are? Is it calm there? Hello, Ahmed Jibril, and I think we've just lost him there. We will try and get back to him. Now, in another development, South Korea's foreign ministry says hundreds of Libyans have stormed a South Korean-operated construction site near Tripoli. At least 17 people were reportedly injured.
As with the Egyptian incident, South Korea's Land, Transport and Maritime Affairs Ministry is preparing to send special flights to the site if necessary. There are several South Korean construction camps in the Benghazi area. We have selected the largest and safest camp and chosen it as the safety shelter. We have taken measures so that South Korean people can all move and evacuate to the camp in case anything happens.
Foreign citizens caught up in the unrest are starting to leave the country. UK embassy staff have been told to fly home. An oil giant BP is preparing to pull its staff from the country. Meanwhile, around 300 Turkish citizens who were evacuated from Libya have returned to Istanbul. Nazanin Sadri reports.
Tears of relief. Men, women and children board a Turkish mercy flight out of the city Benghazi. They witness and experience some of the horrors in the city at the center of Libya's uprising.
The experience that we had in Libya cannot be told, it could only be lived.
Our construction site was ransacked by local people on Saturday night at about 3:15 in the morning. We were all ready for a situation like this. Everybody was sleeping in their daytime clothes.
A few hours later, the sounds of the 300 passengers as they touch down in Istanbul, back on home soil. In the days to come, there will be more such reunions as governments around the world work out how to ensure their citizens aren't counted among the dead and injured victims of the Libyan revolt. Nazanin Sadri, AlJazeera.
Well, Britain has summoned the Libyan ambassador in London to condemn the use of lethal force against protesters. European foreign ministers are meeting later on Monday to discuss the crisis. Until now, Libya's relations with the international community had been improving. Sanctions were lifted in 2004 after almost 2 decades of trade restrictions against the Gaddafi government. Muammar Gaddafi's cooperation on the Lockerbie plane bombing investigation helped ease tensions with the United Kingdom. And the eventual release of Abdel Basit al-Megrahi from a Scottish jail was widely believed to be linked to a $900 billion oil deal with BP. Ties with France have also been good. Libya has signed deals for Airbus planes, defence contracts, as well as nuclear energy. But perhaps the best relations of all are with Libya's old colonial rulers, Italy. Libya now provides more than 20% of the country's oil. It's also cooperating with Silvio Berlusconi's government to block African migrants from heading to Europe from Libya's shores. Well, Jackie Rowland is in Brussels, where EU foreign ministers have been meeting. Jackie, we're expecting a final declaration to come out of this meeting, but we know pretty much what they're going to say.
Yes, I mean, we've already seen a draft copy of that declaration, and the EU leaders are going to condemn the use of violence against peaceful demonstrators, and they will deplore the deaths and injuries caused among these protesters. And we're also expecting that they will go on to reaffirm the right of people in Libya and elsewhere to freely express their opinions, to assemble peacefully, and to call on Libya to respect and protect those rights. Meanwhile, there have been plenty of other declarations, both from EU ministers here at the meeting in Brussels and also from other European government officials in Paris and in other capitals, and we've been hearing some very strongly worded condemnations and warnings to Libya from, among others, the British Foreign Secretary.
We have summoned the Libyan ambassador to the Foreign Office in London today, again to express our absolute condemnation of the use of lethal force against demonstrators. Britain is calling today for an end to such violence and for all concerned to behave with humanity and with restraint. Credibility of the Libyan government in these matters has been undermined so far by their failure to protect their own people and to respond to the legitimate grievances of people in Libya.
And Jackie, it's interesting that when we hear strong words from people like William Hague and other nations, because one of the criticisms have been that international voices have been slow to respond to the various crises happening in this part of the world.
Yes, and I think that I would say that's a fair critique as well, that both European leaders and critically the United States, the statements that we heard from Hillary Clinton and from Barack Obama during the uprising in Egypt in particular, it seemed as though their statements were really lagging behind events, and they were criticised for failing to capture the popular mood in those countries and failing to give the strong moral support at an early stage. It seemed really as though they were playing catch-up. I think what we're witnessing here in Brussels, and as I said in statements made in other European capitals, has been by an effort really by EU governments not to stand accused of the same thing in the case of Libya, and also, of course, so much more grave in Libya because of the huge scale of bloodshed involved in this latest uprising.
OK, Jackie, thanks very much indeed for that update from Brussels. Jackie Rowland there. OK, let's cross to the phone lines now. We can speak to a resident in Tripoli, and we're going to refer to him as Asadiq for his own safety. First of all, Asadiq, can you tell us what's been happening in Tripoli? Because we're hearing reports that there's a lot of chaos there, some buildings on fire.
Are you calling me?
Yes, hello. Is that Asadiq in Tripoli? Hello. Can you just tell us what's going on where you are?
Actually,